So yeah, it's we have all these this kind of tradition of the feminized medium, the audio-based. Again, audio's thought to be not fair at all. Again, binaries, but audio's is positioned below the visual. Men are supposed to be visual, women are more audio, right? That's why there's no such thing as a female gaze.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start kind of picking all the little things together, they just start making a tsunami of television's fun.
Yeah. So how do you think, like, this is like about storytelling and how TV, utilizes storytelling as opposed to film. How do you think like the scholarship is different? Like when you are, trying to get your students to write about analyzing television, how do you frame that differently than you would if you were teaching like film analysis? Is it different?
So for me, well, I do a lot of cultural studies, so there are similarities in between my approach. Although for film, I will lean probably like even with genre, we'll study more the traits of the genre. Whenever I teach television, we actually a lot of times study everything around television. That in a lot of ways, if you think about it, the least important thing about television is the television episode. Because like, think about, again, Friends. How many of those are completely interchangeable? The episodes, right? The sitcom as a form. Yeah. I mean, even the naming conventions of it, or the one about, right? That a lot of television, because there's so much of it, it's harder to have individual episodes that stand out unless you're making a very special episode, like the Buffy Hush episode or the Buffy musical episode, the Pretty Little Liars film noir episode, right? But so many, like I watched how many seasons of Pretty Little Liars? I couldn't tell. I don't even know if I can tell you their names at this point, right? It's like so much of it, actually, you lose the details. Now that's very different than cinema. Cinema, you oftentimes remember very distinctly elements of the film. You remember exact shots. Television doesn't give you that as much. So for film, a lot of times I'll teach it and I'll teach close reading strategies. Whereas for television, we actually are always looking at everything around it. We think about television culture. So we don't just write about it, we make podcasts about it. We look at the way that people talk about television in the politicians, how it gets used by Dan Quayle to condemn single mothers, how it gets embraced by Rush Limbaugh to defend the war on terror, how TV Without Pity or the AV Club shape the way that we understand, like that all the paratext are actually more important part of television than sometimes the individual episode itself is. So television just ends up being much more about culture. It's about the world. It's about demographics. It's about representation in terms of how race is actually portrayed on the television. And race in TV is really pressing. And right now, as we've seen an increase in violence against Asian Americans, and then one of the things you might start to think about is actually the absence of Asian Americans on your television as well, right? That there are larger trends that television really can help us understand our world a little bit better. And also our culture and how our culture is changing. There used to be, whenever there were only 3 stations, 70% of people in America watched I Love Lucy. That's a monoculture. That means that basically you have something that's bringing everyone together, right? That you can talk about. Now, that's really hard. And it's like, I just remember like a couple years ago, and everyone was like, nobody at like Game of Thrones finale was watched by more people than anything in the history of the world. That's just bull. There's no way. You're talking about HBO, which has a small subscription base because it's a premium subscription cable. And then on top of that, lots of people didn't watch it. So the idea that in Game of Thrones was the closest we kind of got to a monoculture moment, but so many people didn't watch that. Like most people in my family didn't even watch that.
Yeah, I don't blame them. So like, do you think like, I mean, this culture you're talking about obviously is like, yeah, totally different because of streaming and subscription services like that.
Everything's broken up now. It's hard for us to find things that we, not only that we all watch, but that we watch at the same time.
Exactly.
Because that's kind of the thing with television, is that with broadcast, and why broadcast was so amazing, is that everybody watched it at the same time and you couldn't watch it again for a long time, right? And you would actually, like, everyone would have things to talk about each week. We saw it kind of with COVID, right? Whenever, right at the beginning, whenever we've had a couple of hits that probably wouldn't have been hits in other times. Like, really, Tiger King? That's right.
Yeah.
That was only because we were all stuck at home, and we were all stuck at home all at the same time. So it created a monoculture of being stuck at home.
Right.
And then because of that, everyone was online for a hot minute at the same time, like looking for stuff to do. And then everybody became obsessed with that show briefly. They've tried to, Queen's Gambit got hot in a somewhat similar way, but not as intense as that March. And they try and say Bridgerton, but you can't ever believe Netflix's numbers. They just lie.
No, definitely not.
They say that you've watched the whole season if you've watched 2 minutes of one episode. Yeah.
So crazy. And their like marketing is wild. Like they're all over Twitter, and yeah. I mean, do you think what do you think about shows like WandaVision that come out once a week? Obviously,
I think they're so smart. So smart, Claire. So where we are right now is that Netflix really, like, they drank their own Kool-Aid, is what I think happened with Netflix. Netflix thought that they had totally destroyed linear television. But in reality, linear television is still existing. It's just existing on platforms that we pay for individually. So we're actually not going to end up saving any more money in the long run either, because if we used to pay $100 for cable, and now I pay for cable because I'm a hockey fan, and so I have to get my hockey, but I pay for Hulu, I pay for Amazon, I pay for Disney, I pay for Apple, I pay right now I don't have Paramount Plus, but man, they're trying to get me with the Real World Reunion and Younger. They're going to have Younger, so I'm going to have to get it for a month, and then they're going to rely on me being too lazy to cancel it. Fair, and then I'm going to end up with every single streamer plus cable. So the idea, like whenever we were going to the a la carte, which was the breakup of the big cable companies and linear, the idea was to save money. Nobody is saving money at this point, really. And they let us go for a few years, that they let us password share in order to get everyone kind of hooked. And now they're absolutely going to be cracking down on that right now. It's already starting with Netflix, but WandaVision, Disney, and Netflix, again, they see the writing on the wall on this. I mean, they already do The Circle and some of their talk shows. So their reality and their talk shows and their K-dramas are already dropping weekly or in 3-episode blocks. But WandaVision wouldn't have been nearly as big of a hit. Neither would have The Mandalorian. Maybe The Mandalorian. I mean, Baby Yoda is adorable.
I mean, obviously.
Like Baby Yoda behind me, I heart Baby Yoda right behind my shoulder. Yes. But Disney knows that dropping all at once actually defeats the purpose, because then all you have is people talking about your show for max 2 weeks. Stranger Things is a great example of this, right? It drops, people talk about it for a week, and then it's gone.
Right.
Whereas WandaVision had 10 weeks of consistently dominating Twitter. Consistently, nonstop. And people ended up getting Disney, like everyone was kind of, it's a driver of subscriptions, because everybody, it's that fear of missing out, and the desire to be part of the conversation is a desire to be part of community. And that's like what we start missing whenever we everything is so atomized, everything's so niche, that we have trouble even finding some common cultural things to talk about.
Interesting. My my like last bonus question is like about like, you know, this whole, you know, moment we're kind of in where people are starting to profit off of COVID-19 by making TV about it while it's still happening. You know what I mean? Like, what's that show called? Love in the Time of Corona, which I think
I haven't seen that
probably,
one.
I know, I'm like, I don't think anyone has actually watched it at all, because, you know, there's this, you know, why would I want to watch something when I'm living it? And I'm just, you know, curious if you have any thoughts about that. Like, have you seen like new Grey's Anatomy or anything like that?
So I've not seen a ton of things that we, well, I find it interesting, other than game shows. Game shows is a thing that I watch and have lots of feelings about, especially daytime game shows. And so those came back, and they're under COVID protocols, and they did really good. One of the fascinating things about the COVID protocols on daytime television is the shift in prizes, because everyone's stuck at home and you can't travel internationally. That the closest, like if you're going to try, the best trip that they can give you is like Lake Tahoe, which is still like, they don't even give you Vegas, because Vegas would expose you. They send you to a lake to like be in a cabin by yourself.
Nice.
And all of the prizes are like televisions or comfy massage chairs, and like everything is a prize based on our current reality, which I think is just absolutely fascinating. And no one can hug anymore. Now there are a lot of shows that have had like masking, and that works fine for medical shows and for police procedurals, really. I think that anyone who's trying to push back on sitcoms, it's probably too early. It's hard to do a sitcom in under those conditions. They did some Walking Dead. You can't even really tell, other than because Walking Dead's hitting its end of its run, and so everyone is, the community's breaking up, and so you just end up following one person by themselves, which works in terms of COVID. The themes of isolation rise. I have watched dating shows, Claire. I have. Love Island was under COVID, and so they basically just tested everyone, got them in, and then they couldn't leave. But you could see like hookups happening that wouldn't usually happen, just because people were so excited to be able to touch someone.
Right.
You're like, this is a terrible idea, but. And then on the Real World Reunion, which is on Paramount Plus. So like I said, I don't have it yet, but I watched the free episode on the Amazon Prime to get me to give my money to Paramount Plus, which is just CBS All Access for the record. They just had to rebrand, because people like me were like, I'm not going to pay twice for CBS. I already pay for CBS. Why would I pay for CBS again? So they had to rename. So that was a dumb name. Paramount Plus is also a dumb name, but they really wanted to be able to say Peak TV.
Oh my God. That is
right?
That is heinous.
But on the Real World, they got back the original Real World, which was whenever I was in high school. Like that's like 1989, maybe. No, 1992. Yeah, like somewhere right in there. I can usually hit things within 3 years, but beyond that,
I'll fact check. I'll look it up.
That they brought them all back to the same apartment in New York all these years later. So they're all grown now, and they're the ones who kind of made reality TV famous. They weren't the first reality TV show, to be clear, but they were the first of the explosion of what we now know as reality television. And Eric, one of the people, tested positive for COVID. So they had to film, because they only filmed for 4 days. And he's in a different apartment on a Zoom screen on the wall, because that even whenever they're trying to get around COVID and kind of do shows that you can get in through testing and then do super short filming, COVID is in the way. Like, and I'm a lot of times I'm way more concerned about the people on production than I am the people on camera. The people on camera are fine. It's the people who are filming, it's catering, it's costumers, like that. This has been really hard on them for sure, while also, like, unfortunately, the entertainment business, because of its precarious nature, means that a lot of these people haven't had money coming in. So it's like that they get pushed because of the precarious nature of the business and the industry to have to film even in these circumstances. But I will say the most fun one are soap operas. Soap operas, sometimes Bold and the Beautiful has been using mannequins. And here's my baby Yoda. I'm going to pretend this is Bold and the Beautiful. And they'll be like, it'll be a person acting, and then they'll go into kiss, and it'll become a mannequin. And it'll be like kissing a mannequin. And then they came up with this storyline. I don't even watch this soap opera, but I'm so excited about this. They came up with a storyline where one of the characters fell out of love with his actual girlfriend, but became obsessed with a mannequin of her.
Oh.
And she just like sits and they have love scenes and she talks to Come on, that's amazing. That is such a smart version of COVID. But more seriously, just for a minute, I will say, I think that there can be something that's valuable about us actually seeing COVID on screen, because we've already lived through a pandemic once in the age of cinema, which would be the Spanish flu, right? Because that 1918, like, you watch movies from that time period because we make you.
Right.
But there's that we actually didn't see any representation of the pandemic on screen. Even though they had like filming protocols and things around just like we do now, but they kept it off screen. And then what that actually led to was us as a nation, as a world, forgetting about pandemics, feeling like pandemics aren't something that is natural, like that naturally happen about every 100 years, and probably more frequently than that. Right. So there is something I think useful now about the fact that there is going to be a record of this in ways that future generations, if there are any future generations, future generations, or they'll be able to look at this and be like, oh yeah, and look at all those people who said it wasn't real. Right, that we actually have, and we know that the same thing happened in 1918 as well, but it never made it on screen. Now we're going to have so much footage of this that we can hope that maybe, it's always a hope that we won't make the same exact mistakes that were made over and over and over again, which clearly that doesn't matter. It happens. It's we don't learn.
Well, those are all the questions I have. So, I mean, do you have anything else that you would love to share about television?
Television's fun, and you don't think you're better than it.
Nice.
And too, as media producers, I oftentimes point out that there's way more jobs in television than there are in cinema, and that you can break into television much easier than you can break into movies. You don't, you know, there's just so many jobs, and a lot of times people come in through reality TV. So, you know, you have to be open-minded about TV. And some of our most successful alums, like Ben Hatmaker, he worked on a bunch of Lifetime movies, which I love because I love Lifetime and Lifetime movies. But the kind of that you might just want to think about why so many things are denigrated, and is it actually just because who the audience is? Well, I'll say this with Twin Peaks behind me. So if you haven't watched that, watch that.
Thank you so much, Dana, for speaking with me. I appreciate your thoughts on television.
And congrats to UPTV for finally being legal.